Do you want to be remembered forever?
Yes.
Well, if I got just the thing for you, become a relic today.
What's a relic?
Only the coolest thing ever, a relic is the dead body parts of saints.
Oh.
But that's not all. Relics had complex historical significance to medieval society. Relics were seen as the living body of the saint. Relics were originally used for their healing purposes. In the absence of a patron saint who could heal the sick, any simple monk could use the healing power of a relic to cure the sick.
Okay, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah. Get out of here. Relics themselves had no power. It was medieval society which instilled a celestial energy in them. Now, without the reverence and glorification that people gave relics, they would just be a pile of bones on the ground. Relics also served as a means to create an identity for a town. They weren't just solely a mechanism of devotion. Now, if a town could obtain the long dead remains of a saint, they could build their entire identity around the patron. Any obscure town could become the village which houses the arm of St. Bartholomew, or more simply, the village of St. Thomas. In the medieval world, people would look to saints for protection and pray to their patron.
In this video, we will look at the significance of relics, as well as the practice of relic theft and relic fraud. Relic wasn't just a facet of worship. Relics were a catalyst for violence, deception, death, and contributed to the overall moral corruption of the Catholic Church.
But before we talk about the questionable implications and practices of worshiping relics and obtaining them, let's first look at what is called relic humiliation. When relics stopped producing miracles or failed to protect a town or bring good fortune and harvest, the monks of a church would punish relics. To do this, they would place relics on the ground, cover them in thorns, and then extinguish all of the candles in a church and leave the relic there humiliated and ashamed. Now, the whole point of this was to shame the relic into performing miracles again. Now, one might denounce this practice of punishing a corpse as foolish or strange. But in reality, it was just perfectly logical to medieval society. Now, they didn't receive much protection from diseases or invaders, so they had to look to the supernatural to solve their problems. If a monastery was poor, there was a great deal of temptation for them to obtain a relic by any means necessary. Now, in the book, Furtra Sacra, which is the Latin term for holy theft, Patrick Geary states that a key ingredient in the development of the cult of a new patron was the acquisition of his or her relics, and the possession of the remains of a popular saint could mean the difference between a monastery's oblivion and survival. A majority of the relics during the medieval ages were found in Italy or the Holy Land, so it was very difficult for people in Europe to obtain a genuine body part of a saint. But if a bishop or a monastery could procure a relic, then their standing and reputation and church would increase dramatically. This is because pilgrims would flock from all over and pay money to see the relic and obtain its miracles. The ways in which a monastery produced a relic were never without unethical practices. For example, during the Crusades, relics would be taken out of Jerusalem. Crusaders would invade the Holy Land and kill those living there to steal their relics. Now, this practice of violence and murder being one of the paramount ways in which one produced a relic exemplifies a questionable method of Catholicism. One cannot worship a holy object ethically or even spiritually if said object was obtained through violence and bloodshed. Following the sack of Constantinople in 1204 during the Fourth Crusade, Crusaders would specifically target churches and sack them for their relics. For months, these crusaders would storm churches and search for the relics that were hidden by monks to take them back to Europe. Another way in which relics were maliciously collected was through the raiding and stealing of catacombs. Now, the most famous example of these is an account of a man named Duestana, who would infiltrate Roman catacombs and steal the bodies of martyrs to sell to monasteries. He would traffic these saints from Italy to Europe. Now, it is highly unlikely that a majority of these relics were genuine, but nonetheless, Duestana's business flourished. One story found in the Florus Historium, which is a compilation of many accounts from a monastery and an abbey, tell of two monks who are said to have found the head of John the Baptist. They say that the location of this head was revealed to them by the saint himself. Later, it was discovered that this was in fact not the head of John the Baptist, but a fake. This identifies an integral problem in the practice of worshiping dead body parts, which is the mass falsification of relics. Many churches would dig up random bones or raid catacombs to commit this relic fraud. This was exacerbated by a decree of Nicaea in 787, which said that no church or monastery could be dedicated without the placing of a relic. The establishment of a relic, whether genuine or not, was made necessary by this decree, and churches scrambled to present the church with a genuine relic. Now, this explains the multiplicity of the same saint for multiple limbs. If you add up all the genuine relics of John the Baptist, you'll find that he's a three-headed monster with 5 arms. This is one of the heads. Now, as relics didn't come with a certificate of authenticity, it was very easy for any church or monastery to grab a piece of bone and claim it as a saint. In order for pilgrims to believe that a relic was what it claimed to be, churches had to come up with an interesting story to excite the imaginations of the faithful. One of these fabricated stories used to authenticate a lie can be found in the Acta Sanctorum, or Acts of the Saints. Now, this book is a collection of documents which detail the lives of these saints. This includes the miracles they performed, as well as how their relics were treated. Specifically, one story from 1162 details a child who is said to have been visited by Saint Monica. Saint Monica told this boy to tell the clergyman of Saint Aurora to bring my remains to a more respectable resting place and get me out of here. The child told the clergyman of this, who then decided that they would dig up these remains and bring them back with them to their church. They said to have dug in a Roman ruins between marble and water until they finally found the sarcophagus of Saint Monica. They then retrieved the bones and brought them back to the bishop, where they were received with much joy. As cool as this story is, it is entirely fallacious. Evidence has been collected to show that these men were at these Roman ruins that the boy supposedly reported. But what they don't tell us is that the relics of Saint Monica, including her bones and sarcophagus, could not be found at this location. Instead, the clergyman collected some random bones they found at the Puerto Romana necropolis and just made up the story. Digging up random corpses and calling them a saint is obviously already a sin. However, monasteries didn't just want to show pilgrims their saints, but exploit them for money and profit off of them as well. When you think of the most profitable ventures in today's society, your mind might go to something like stock trading, crypto, or drop shipping. Well, in the medieval ages, the thing that really brought home the bacon was dead body parts. The example of relics bringing economic prosperity to churches can be found in the case of Thomas Becket. Thomas Becket was the Archbishop of Canterbury when, in 1170, he was slain by soldiers in his own cathedral. A relic was made of his body exactly where he died, and it is said that after his death, a flurry of miracles spread across the land, and anyone who visited his tomb were healed. When the Pope heard this news, Becket was canonized as St. Thomas, and Canterbury became one of the most famous places to make pilgrimages to in Europe. Now, this wasn't just because St. Thomas was canonized. It was also because the monks at this cathedral were smart. They knew how to play the game, man. They were finance bros before finance was a thing. These people marketed not only St. Thomas's body to be seen by pilgrims, but they gave out free vials of his blood to to anyone that visited. Now, this blood was diluted with water, and it is also speculated that the little bit of blood that was in these vials was actually animal blood. Now, this is pretty obviously already a scummy thing to do, but at least no one got hurt. Well, the true intentions of Relics reveal themselves when you look at the case of Uzes. This region in France saw a rampant infection of unknown origin spreading across the region in 829. Sores like sulfur burns and seizures like epilepsy plagued the patient. Now, in terror, the people of Uzes flocked to the shrine of St. Firminius. They brought offerings of silver, gold, and money in hopes to be cured by a miracle. The clerics at the Church of St. Firminius encouraged these offerings and exploited the situation for their own financial gain. Pilgrims and townsfolk continued to keep coming to this shrine and giving their offerings despite no miracles of cures occurring. Instead of attempting to help these people in any meaningful way, like providing food or attention, the clerics of this order took advantage of this situation and preyed on the sick. The moral decay of the Catholic Church during the medieval ages makes itself glaringly apparent here. No longer were relics obtained solely for the purpose of devotion, but now it was about money. Cold, hard cash. Monasteries didn't care if their relic was obtained through violence or even if it was real. They just cared if it was bringing pilgrims and coin. If monasteries didn't fraudulently make a relic, they would obtain it through more sinister means. Relic theft was not only prominent in the medieval ages, but viewed as normal, and it was also seen as an appropriate method to obtain relics. While some saw it as deplorable, others saw it as a very valuable and genuine way to obtain a relic. Documents during this time even provide evidence that Furtra Sacra wasn't even considered theft at all. In the 12th century, a cleric named Theodotus writes the account of a bishop who saved the relic of St. Prudentius while on a pilgrimage on his way back to Burgundy. Now, Theodotus writes this account of this bishop who, in 881, took a pilgrimage, but on his way back, he stopped through the region of Antiquain, which was ravaged by wars and invaders for many years. Now, he passed through this one village and stayed in a church one night to seek refuge. He was welcomed with open arms by the monks there, and they regaled him of the glorious story of their martyr. They also invited him to sing lauds, which is a prayer service. After being shown the relic, the bishop didn't believe that it was receiving the proper attention it deserved. Now, he thought this because not only was the church falling apart, but so was the relic itself. Upon seeing this, the bishop became overwhelmed with sadness and decided that he would steal the relic and bring it back to Burgundy. That night, he broke into the shrine, stole the relic, and returned home, where he was met with joy and celebration from his entire clergy. This was not an isolated event. There are many different accounts of monks who would go on pilgrimages, stay in churches, and then decide to steal their saint for their own. Many of these stories followed the accounts written by Theodotus. There are over 100 different recorded instances of relic theft. Now, these weren't just covert missions, but there would also be bands of merchants who would go to distant shores to capture churches and claim their relics as their own. One of these covert missions is described in a document called the Translatio Sanctae Fide. Now, this document explains that in 866, the monks of Conquis sent one of their own, named Aranistus, to the church of Agen to steal their relic of Saint Foy. Now, Aranistus posed as a secular priest, and for 10 years, he stayed within the church. Finally, he was promoted to be guardian of the church's treasures, and one night, he saw his chance to strike. Unguarded was this treasure room, and he broke into it, opened the tomb of St. Foy, and stole the body to bring back with him to his own church. He was then met with great joy and reception upon his arrival. Now, this is the current relic of St. Foy. Now, I'd wait about 2 or 3 years for this thing, but 10 years? That's just absurd. Another interesting story of relic theft, and my personal favorite, occurred in the 12th century when Bishop Fettkamp visited another monastery. The monks at this other monastery showed the bishop their most prized possession, the hand of Mary Magdalene. The bishop then leaned close to the hand as if to kiss it, and then bit off a piece of Mary Magdalene's hand. The bishop defended himself by saying, "No, I was just participating in the Eucharist. This is what I do every Sunday." But then the monks observed him spitting the piece of the hand back into his hand and pocketing it to take back to his own monastery. Making marketable memorabilia out of the deceased remains of martyrs may have been socially acceptable, but legally it was prohibited. Now, back to the book Fortra Sacra, Patrick Geary writes that legality and morality are seldom the same. Relic theft was made illegal in the medieval ages, but this didn't stop people from committing these actions or even perceiving them as morally wrong. Despite a Roman law stating that martyrs' bodies could not be transported, saints remained mobile. The moral deterioration of Catholicism made itself known when churches went about collecting relics. To get their grubby little hands on a hand or other body part, churches would steal from other monasteries, make fraudulent relics, hire people to raid catacombs, and even go on crusades, which resulted in the death of many, all in the name of placing a saint in their church. People justified the taking and faking of relics in many ways, including the rationalization that it was good for the community, that they were protecting the relic from pagans and decay, or the justification that they were spreading the saint's power to other regions. No matter what justification a monastery gave, it doesn't change the fact that relics were used for immoral purposes. The Catholic Church saw a shift in the medieval ages. They stopped focusing on devotion and turned their attention towards money. They started to prioritize profit over prayer and financial gain over everything. The absolutions from sins, the selling of indulgences, and the profiting from relics all added to the moral deterioration of the church. The worshiping of relics allowed the church to take a backseat to helping people because they believed that the relics would solve all their problems by producing miracles. While the phenomenon of relics is fascinating to observe, overall, it contributed to conflicts within the church and facilitated the exploitation of the faithful.
What's a relic?
No, how do I become a relic?
Go back to the what's a relic?
2, 1. But that's not all. Relics were used for... Relics had... Following the fact... Does this look cool, me doing this?
No.
I'm going to say that that's a yes.